Mary Meet Annie here with a topic video on the subject of binding, cursing, and hexing, and aligned energies. I wanted to begin with a bit of forthrightness. Most of my video is going to emphatically declare my beliefs against these activities. But I don't want it to seem as if it's coming from someone who's never done it and will never do it again, because it's not so. The truth is, if we declare we are witches, and part of that description, if not the most powerful part of that description, perhaps the thing which defines us more than anything, is that we can manifest change by our actions and our focus, whether it's healing, whether it's nurturing, whether it's creation in some way, or whether it is an act that is destructive in nature. The given is, if we believe we can comfort, heal, and create, we also believe we can destroy, in a sense, just as easily. But where those actions don't fall in the just as easily category is the thought and the intent that we put into them. Now, whether you follow something as specific as a moral guidance or suggestions in the way of the read, or your own spiritual beliefs, or the conversations you've had with your gods or with the wise humans who counsel you, there is something, for most of us, which rules the decisions we make in life, if we take the time to live with those decisions. The thing about binding, cursing, and hexing is it invokes the confidence in the witch in that moment, in a way that they are all-knowing and all-powerful. I'm not saying we don't have our moments, that we are indeed that. But there's an assumption when we curse another, or bind another, or place a hex upon them, that we know better, that we know everything there is to know about the situation, and in our wisdom and our spiritual maturity, or our energetic maturity, if we don't see it as a spiritual act, and that we have judged and deemed what we are about to do appropriate. If we are at the height of anger or fear, even at the height of the well-intentioned emotions of being protective of loved ones, it can be very difficult to stop and think where our desires arise from. Fear, anger, a rage which we do not comprehend at that moment in its vastness. When the urge to strike out, and by strike out I also mean binding or hexing, because anytime we place our will over the will of another, we're reaching out, we're striking out. The source of that action is internal. We are most likely reactive. We are responding to something which has happened, and then an emotion and an energy rises from within us. Do we always stop to think where that comes from? Do we always stop to think if we're making it about ourselves, or even about another, if we're acting on the behalf of another, and we are not thinking beyond that moment and those people? If you are a practicing witch, you know what your powers and your abilities are. If you don't know what your powers and your abilities are, the answer is, under no circumstances consider binding, hexing, or cursing. You haven't yet determined the energy that you control within the wider energy of the universe. If you come to a spiritual place or an energetic place where you know that, you have even greater responsibility to consider the energy of striking out. Because you know what you can do. You know what you can manifest. To wield that kind of power is also to live with it and to understand your intent behind any action. To understand that you have decided, you contain the wisdom in that moment to understand the entirety of the situation and act appropriately. And that you have decided in that moment that whatever comes of it in regards to yourself or others, intended or unintended, is appropriate in light of the action you have taken. Binding, cursing, and hexing. One of the most powerful responsibilities we take on. For me, in great part because of the teachers I spent years with when I was a young woman, when my ability to harness my anger, to explore it, to see where it came from, was a lot more limited than it is nowadays. It still made sense to me when my teachers guided us to consider any aggressive action we needed to take in life, and we were always told there would be times, in light of the nuance control of energy that would impact the situation. And by that I mean consideration. If we are angered and want to strike out at someone, disabling them in some way or surrounding them with an energy which mutes the energy they are putting out, that it should be done in a way that impacts the wider energy of the world, outside of the energy we send in a situation where we are hexing, binding, or cursing, or the vibrations of that energy into the universe. It's not a singular thing that shoots like an arrow to the source we intend it to make contact with. It impacts everything along the way, and it rebounds from that. We've made a change in existence, a powerful change in existence. There is an amazingly challenging responsibility to take on any destructive act in life. My earliest teachers taught us, when living with, making the decision to bind or contain the will of another in any way, to think instead where that was being directed, to keep it from arriving, to dissipate it, instead of going to the source and eliminating it. Oh, that seems simplistic on some levels, and when I was in my 20s, it was like, you're telling me to be nice about my anger? No. I was being encouraged to explore it completely and fully and be aware of what I created by reacting to it. I was not being told in any way to back off from what I knew needed to be done, but rather to be more creative about how to do it. To null energy, to dissipate energy, to redirect energy from a negative source. In time we learn, sometimes in obvious ways at the time, and sometimes as time passes and we look back. Oftentimes the binding of what we perceive of as negative energy, the containing it within the vessel of the person who is creating it, feeds that person. Feeds that person in a way that the energy grows and looks for, becomes a more violent release in time. The thing about cursing, binding, and hexing, you might believe it's once and done. You lay some sort of working over a situation. But have you noticed, if you've tried, and I think most of us have, as we're learning our magics and our power within the universe, you don't eliminate the energy that you're trying to affect. If you contain it, it grows. Your experience might be different, but I'm being honest about my experience of this. If you let it leave the vessel of its creation and dissipate it, it doesn't become the volcano that's waiting to erupt. All your personal satisfaction might not be as great, because your action will not be as dramatic. Maybe others won't see what you've done. Maybe you won't see what you've done in the same way. Again, the ego likes to be fed when it comes to these highly dramatic emotional moments. When are you so absolutely sure that you know what's best? And there will be times that is so. It's an illusion, but it will be your reality. And when you take action on that, and you will, if you're exploring what you can create in the world, how are you understanding the full impact of what you do on your intended and at a wider energetic level? What this comes down to me, I have, and I will, bind or null the energy of someone or something in a negative situation. It's actually a powerful aspect of nurturing and healing to me, this dealing with errant energy. It's always going to be something that's part of my practice. But living with what I want to do, why I want to do it, and what I hope to gain from it, has become a greater and greater responsibility as I have matured in my abilities and as I've matured in my relationships to my gods. They encourage me to work from a place of love. I, on the other hand, fight that in times when it just doesn't feel like a situation that can be loved away or influenced with compassion. There's always going to be times I'm going to strike out. What I learned along the way that was important for me is I've never done a working that was chaotic or destructive in potential. And that I did not make part of my working, aligning with my guides, my guardians, and my gods, that if what I was doing was not to the higher, better will of the situation, they would, on my behalf, know what I sent out. That works for me, because I have a deep and powerful and intimate relations with my guides, my guardians, and my gods. I would never undertake a chaotic or destructive action without having sought their wisdom and gone deep into my own personal place of wisdom before reacting to a situation. It leaves me wondering sometimes why what I intended did not happen. They knew something. They understood something. Their wisdom was greater than mine in the situation. But I've also felt in the times that I felt truly aligned to the energies that I work with, that what I was doing was appropriate in every way to the circumstance. I don't counsel you not to bind, curse, or hex. You have to determine what rises in you that leads you to feel it needs to be done. And be truly willing to do the work of understanding where your intention is arising from, what you're assuming of the situation, what you're willing to accept as repercussions to yourself and to others. Some of those others will be innocent victims to your energy. In order to meet face to face something you feel needs to be addressed in an aggressive way. It requires introspection, self-awareness, connection to our wisdom self and our higher self. It requires imagination. It requires foresight. If you are not as equally connected to your powers which birth and nurture and create, I honestly don't believe you should be exploring the powers of hexing, cursing, and binding. The wisdom in dealing with that energy arises from those other three places. Cursing, hexing, and binding can be the appropriate thing to do in a certain situation if your beliefs and the energy of the universe and your spiritual beliefs, if they're part of your practice, inform you you're working from a place of wisdom. But beware a feeling of righteousness, that you know what's best, and you don't stop to think about the power you have to manifest change. And stop to think, are you being creative in your working regarding the ways in which you can address an unwanted situation, an unwanted energy, and let's be blunt, perhaps an unwanted person in some way? Are you being imaginative and creative? Or are you having a hissy fit at the energetic level? Are you mature when it comes to your practice? Do you know what energies or deities you're aligned to? What's watching over your shoulder, in a way? Because you will be, I have been, we all are fallible when our emotions are involved and we take on a binding, hexing, or cursing. What have you aligned to that has your best interests in mind? Because your best interests are going to be that whatever you do is in the best interest of the entire situation, not just satisfying an emotional need you are experiencing. Experiencing the call to destroy, in some sense, is truly understanding the power of the witch. It's aligned to all power, which creates and recreates. But there is an immense responsibility aligned to it. I offer this video as things for you to consider, which include where you are in your path, how much you appreciate, and truly appreciate, the power that you have, why you would use it in a certain way, and what repercussions not only are you willing to receive, because that's probably easier in light of the more difficult consideration, what repercussions are you willing to allow to become part of the tapestry of the universe because of something you have chosen to do, something you've chosen to create or destroy? In the end, I would just say, which take heed, consider all possibilities, be creative in manifesting change, and know that there is no small hexing, cursing, or binding within the flow of the universe. I wish you all mirth and reverence.